Welcome back. We continue our discussion about our constitution that recently celebrated its 25th anniversary. We are asking if it's achieved what it was intending to do. But another question, is this constitution still relevant? Or as some voices have been saying, it's time for it to be amended. Say your name and who you represent, and can you answer my question? Is it time to review the constitution?
My name is Mishak Mbangula from Mining Affected Communities United in Action. I'm the national coordinator. Yes, I think it's time that we have to definitely review it, because since the constitution has been there, we have seen multinational companies infringement of the human rights, polluting the land, polluting water, all these things. So they have not done anything. Nobody has been held accountable for this section 24 of the Constitution, which states very well that we have the right to live in an environment that is clean, not harmful. But that has done, nothing has happened to those people who are. So the multinational companies, under the legislation of MPRD, they're given power to able to, do as they want with the people. So the Constitution, to us, it's a very much useless document, because it has never served anything for the communities.
Now, if it's to be reviewed, I mean, this government that's been not found, when I heard earlier, not to be diligent in implementing it, what confidence can we have that if it's reviewed, they would do so? Yes, please, Mandisa.
Okay, so I'd like to make a demonstration with the New Nation Movement case, wherein Justice Madlanga and his panel on the 11th of June agreed with the New Nation Movement that the Electoral Act is unconstitutional. I've heard people say it's these portions that we challenged in court as litigants that are unconstitutional, but essentially, I mean, I'm sure the DG can confirm or reject what I'm saying, but if one aspect of a law is unconstitutional, then the entire act needs to be reviewed, because often the various sections will impact other areas and even other laws, as the Electoral Act does. It impacts at least 10 other pieces of legislation. But here's the issue, right? So take the Electoral Act that is declared unconstitutional. The Parliament was instructed to redesign it and basically amend it to make sure that it's in line with the Constitution, simply put, and various guidelines were offered in that judgment. And so they didn't really have that much work to do. They just needed to implement what the judgment said. And they've gone and reproduced a so-called amended Electoral Act, which is, in our view as New Nation Movement, even more unconstitutional than the original one. So this proves that it doesn't matter what you put into the Constitution. What matters mostly is whether the implementation and bringing that to life and into full effect through the legislatures, even up to councils, including the citizens participating in that process, how that implementation and putting the laws that come out of the Constitution actually gives full effect to what the Constitution says people must experience. So if I have the right to education, the Department of Education and all its entities that report to it must do everything in their power through budgeting, making resources available, employing the right people, etc., infrastructure and all those things, research and development, to give that effect and make sure that I have access to that free education.
Giving effect to the rights, it looks like it's a very important part of how you implement this constitution, because it contains the Bill of Rights. I want to hear from you, from the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission, when we're listening, Advocate Majola, about the challenges that have been faced the constitution. What's top of mind for you?
Well, what's top of mind for me is that, number one, we have got a good constitution. One has, first of all, looked at other countries' constitutions. We have spoken with people in other countries. The constitution that we have is the envy of almost all.
But we're not succeeding to implement it effectively and efficiently.
So what comes to mind is exactly what that I was coming to it, to say what we have is very good, but we are not implementing it. We started this democracy with a big inequality gap. And the Constitution...
And today we're the most unequal country in the whole world.
Today we're the most unequal country in the world. And in fact, this Constitution, the trajectory of this Constitution was that we should try to reduce the inequality. But we've got so many examples that one can quote to show that inequality has grown. There's more poverty, more unemployment, more inequality in the country. So, but I do not think that the cure is to amend the Constitution, because...
Is it not time to ditch it as well?
I don't think so, because we have not tried the Constitution. We have implemented it to a particular extent, and then there is a lot that we have not done.
Okay. So please say your name, and where you're from. We'll come to you there. We'll come to you just now.
Nelvis Tekema, President of AZAPO. In fact, this constitution must be reviewed, not just reviewed, but overhauled.
You as AZAPO also
Yes.
opposed it at the beginning.
We did not even participate because it was a sellout program. The reason for that is that we are not telling the people the truth.
What is the truth?
The truth is that the 1996 Constitution was drafted under the constraints of the 36 constitutional principles that were drafted within the ambit of the apartheid parliament and passed by the apartheid parliament. As a result of that, even the 1996 drafters could not drift away.
But the ANC says chunks of it were based on the Freedom Charter.
Oh, well, that's what it is, the Freedom Charter, which says everybody who is in South Africa, it belongs to it. But the point that I want to make, the point that I want to make is that to the extent that this constitution was designed to guarantee white minority rights, frustrate the black majority liberation project, so this constitution has succeeded. It has not failed. And I'm saying this because if you go to the Constitution, you'll find that there is no land in the Constitution, there is no dignity in the Constitution. Those things you will not find. In fact, AZAPO tested this Constitution in 1996. When we checked justice in the Constitution, we didn't find it, the 1996 Constitution. In fact, you will remember that when we said those people who killed Mxenge Biko and others, must be followed legally, they were protected. So justice was kicked out. In fact, if you look at Section 25(1), you will see there it starts by saying no person will be deprived of their property. Who is that? Who has property in this country?
So your point as AZAPO is that the Constitution needs to be changed, really. Yes, ma'am, please say your name and who you represent.
I think it's important that I follow my president. My name is Tikizwa Dabula. I am the Deputy Secretary General of AZAPO. And indeed, the South African Constitution needs to be overhauled. Right? We have independent statutory bodies like the South African Law Reform Commission that have to date not rendered obsolete Section 25 of the Constitution. One of the most important things that this commission is tasked with is to render obsolete or unnecessary certain provisions. And in my view, Section 25 is among those that are unnecessary, right? As my president has said, Section 25, subsection 1 suggests that no one may be deprived of property. And there is no sane black person that would want to protect any property unless it is those land thieves that came and stole not only our resources, our dignity, but our land, and have couched the Constitution such that it protects their interests. So it cannot be that 29 years into democracy, we still have a section that protects the rights of the minority that came to steal, acres of our land.
In fact, Section 25 is the impediment of the expropriation of land without compensation, and that's where it really gives us a very serious problem. It needs to be scrapped and we start afresh so that people can be able to fight against this issue of giving the elites the rights.
Yes, ma'am. Say your name and who you represent.
My name is Tulufelo Musala, and I'm from the CRL Rights Commission. Hill the division of the past, we are in about 25 years into democracy.
Nearly 30 years.
Nearly 30 years into democracy. And I'm listening to the discussion around whether or not to review or amend. But I just want to go back a bit and highlight the beauty of our Constitution, to say that especially from the CRL Rights Commission, it was established under Section 181 to say that we look look at the promotion and protection of the rights of the cultural, religious, and linguistic communities. And perhaps most do not know this, that we are the only country in Africa and even around the world that looks at issues around culture, issues around religion, issues around the linguistic community. So in other words, that we are always trying to conscientize the people about that dignity, about their rights and knowing. So with that said, my point here is to say, as much as we are looking at the reviewing, we also have to focus on the implementation. But we cannot do that without going back and looking at the achievements within the constitutional
It's nearly 30 years later. It's nearly 30 years later. Yes, ma'am. Please say your name and who you represent.
Thank you. My name is Constance Mohale, and I am the national coordinator of the Alliance for Rural Democracy and a campaigns builder of the Stop the Bantustan campaign. I don't want to defend the constitution because, yes, it was a compromise. But to me, has been the only instrument that the poor has been able to use to defend their rights. We have been in the Constitutional Court, in the High Court, defending our environment, our land rights, where big mining companies are coming into the land that is in communal land and stripping people of their customary land rights. And government has lost. So the problem here is not the Constitution. The problem here is Parliament. We've got a useless Parliament that failed to implement Section 25 gives Parliament power to legislate land to make sure that expropriation of land for land reform purposes is happening. It has never done that. They are the ones who are saying the Constitution should be amended. Why? Because they've lost in court against the poor people. The only problem about our Constitution is access to justice because it is so expensive. You cannot go to High Court without a lawyer. You cannot go to the Constitutional Court without a lawyer. And thank God for these human rights lawyers like Legal Resource Center who have been in the side of the poor. So the problem here, it is not the Constitution. It is the implementers, and I want to challenge the Department of Justice, the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, the Department of Rural Development. They have built the interministerial committee. You know, for doing what? To amend the laws to make sure that they give powers to individuals, elite traditional leaders who will make deals on behalf of the people.
And not to the people.
Not to the people. They have, the first 10 years, that's correct, it was progressive, but then they scrapped the Reconstruction and Development Program, replaced it with GEAR, and that is why we find ourselves now where we are right now. So they have to point a finger to themselves, and we have to not uphold the Constitution. We can review Constitution and make sure that it still works, but we have to just erase Parliament. Everybody who is there is not the right person.
That's a very strong emotion. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Professor Kaba from the PAC.
Yeah.
The poor design instrument, no matter how well it's implemented, it will still give you poor quality. Look at the crime situation in this country. That is embedded in the Constitution. If you look at the fact that, one, you cannot torture a detained, which we agree with, but at the same time, he's got the right to keep quiet. So how do you get the truth if the person who's accused keeping quiet? So you can see the biasness to common law versus customary law, because in a customary environment, you will have a right to defend yourself.
Does the Constitution provide us answers for that?
It's a constitutional flaw, because it gives a right that makes catching a crime impossible for the service.
Please pass the mic to the gentleman in front. Ma'am, you've been waiting for some time. Please say your name and who you represent.
Okay, I'm Sarah Gon. I'm from the Institute of Race Relations. I think the problem is we underestimate how complex a country we are, the various interest groups, the various issues that matter to us, and ultimately all the Constitution can do is support us. It can't do anything per se. It's a matter of legislation.
But what we've heard earlier is that we can do something. The governors can do something.
Well, what we can do is we can use the Constitution to argue our rights and to try and change our rights and to try and change legislation, whatever it may be. But the essence of everything going well or not going well depends on the government of the day, the government that's in power, because they are entrusted entirely with making sure that whatever the society needs happens.
Yeah, is this constitution still aligned to the aspirations of the people and the needs, especially of the poor?
My view is that the alignment hasn't changed and the aspirations haven't changed. What hasn't happened is that the aspirations have not been met, and that's a political problem.
Yes, Advocate Sidiso Tipanyane from CIRAC, please.
Thank you. As a constitutional lawyer, my view is very simple, is that a constitution is simply a product of the people. And no constitution is actually cast in stone. You look at the U.S. Constitution, it's supposed to be one of the best. What happened? Civil war, slavery, and stuff like that. So it is a journey which we all of us have to take part in order to produce what we think will work best for us.
But 30 years on, it seems this constitution is not working best for us.
Well, that's why that it has to be reviewed to see where it's going wrong and how can it be fixed. So it's both the content as well as implementation. And therefore, we should be very clear. No constitution is actually cast in stone.
Yeah, but we celebrate it now and again when it's mentioned as a model constitution. We heard earlier saying that it's used everywhere in the world. Yes, Doctor?
I don't think we should say it's 30 years and nothing is happening or we're not delivering. Or the reality of the matter is that you have to judge it against the 300 years of colonialism, subjugation, apartheid, and so on and so forth. 25 years in the life of a nation is still it's a long period, but it's a short period. If you look in the world and look, he was making reference to the US, which is a democracy which is more than 250 years old.
But are we always going to go back to where we compare this period of our nation to the colonial period?
No, we are not. But the point I'm making is that I think you will not be making a fair judgment in 25 years to 30 years to say this constitution has failed. The reality is that a lot has been achieved and a lot still remains to be done. So let's be mindful of that fact that the reason why we're here, we no longer have racial discrimination, is because the Constitution has outlawed racial discrimination. Number of things that the Constitution has said, we must all be equal before the law. Whatever that hasn't been achieved between 1994 to today has been because of the Constitution.
Yeah, but
and it is the Constitution
but the inequality gap is just
growing. Yes, it's a responsibility of all of us to work on it, but it's not the Constitution that says you must entrench the inequalities. The fact that we make reference to courts is because the Constitution talks about the supremacy of the Constitution, that you can go to courts to resolve your disputes.
And perhaps government is not succeeding in meeting the needs of the people using the Constitution or implementing it.
That's a different discussion. That's a different discussion. Okay. So you don't say you want to ditch the Constitution simply because the government of the day is failing. But the Constitution makes a provision that whoever governs you, you must give them the right to govern you. Every 5 years, you must decide who must govern you on the basis of that Constitution. Because if we drive the nation into the business of saying every quarter of a century we want to throw away the Constitution, the discussion now about the Second Republic and so on and so forth, I don't think that's helpful.
But you have voices in the ANC now calling for a review or an amendment of the Constitution. Sir, please say your name and who you represent.
Thank you very much, Brother. My name is Selby Majola, and I'm a constitutional law scholar. Look, the Constitution actually, as it is, has sufficient safeguards in relation to all the issues that need to be addressed. Because if you look at the daily experiences of men and women of South Africa, you would understand that that should be, as we evaluate, as we assess, should be the parameters upon which we grapple with whether the Constitution has succeeded or not. And there are still quite a lot of challenges. Panelists have indicated that there are quite a number of areas that still need to be improved. I mean, it is actually a little bit of a problem that up to this date, we still have human dignity, schools that are still with inequalities. We still have so many service delivery protests because people who are supposed to be implementing the Constitution have actually abandoned some of the areas. The DG was correct. Dr. Matthew Posa wrote a very, very good opinion piece on Sunday, and his view is that it is not the Constitution that is a problem. It is the people who are charged with the responsibility of implementing it that we shouldn't be having some of the challenges that we are at now. So the Constitution is there. It just needs the will to actually implement its provision so that
we'll continue our discussion here on We the Nation about our constitution. We've sort of tried to unpack so far